How y'all feeling? Happy Friday. I haven't went live this week, so I was like, let me get on here and do what I do, have a conversation. I'm in the middle of packing orders. I just want to also thank everyone who purchased something from my shop this week. Your jewelry is getting packed up and will be on the way to you soon. Having a very interesting week healing. Very interesting week. Reflecting on a lot of the trauma. Y'all know that's my word. I'm that trauma chick. I'm that trauma yogi. Talk about trauma and how yoga has helped me release my trauma. But this week it was a significant trauma release. For those who don't know part of my story, when I was 14, I was actually abducted, raped, and abused, and kept held captive for over 8 months. And I survived that. It was significant trauma to my body, and I've been doing therapy and other things that could help me release that. But yoga was the most useful tool that I picked up because it allowed me to move that traumatic energy out of my body. So I want to talk about establishing healthy boundaries from a space of peace, from a space of being an abused person. And because, you have a story of abuse, you tend to accept things that other people don't actually accept. Peace, you tend to allow people in your space and to allow them to abuse your space for longer periods of time. Peace, alafia, boru oboye, tend to allow them to stay around for longer periods of time because you have been abused and you do have trauma, and so your trauma tells you that this behavior, while it doesn't feel great, is not that bad, because it's probably not as bad as the trauma that you've experienced in your life, and you have a comparative analysis going on in your head, And so, as someone who went through a lot of trauma, I went through those stages of, okay, this is acceptable because it's not like they're doing this horrible thing that happened to me that I don't know how I survived. So, what I had to first learn as a survivor of abuse and trauma was to stop comparing the things that were happening to me to the things that happened to me in the past, and therefore making them okay, making them acceptable. And I think that we do this a lot because once you've been abused and traumatized a certain kind of a way, you also feel like a burden to the people around you in a way, because you come with all this trauma and baggage, and so you're trying to allow space for people to be in your life, and that may look like accepting things that are not in alignment with your highest and greatest good. And the way that you know that these things are not in alignment with your highest and greatest good is how? Feelings, right? Our feelings are measurements for what's showing up in our space. So if someone comes and they're abusive to you, and it makes you feel bad, and it reminds you of an instance that you had in the past, and you can automatically track that this doesn't feel good. I know what this feels like. This is abuse, right? So then you can build your boundaries from there, right? So either you're going to tell that person, hey, I don't like this behavior, I don't want it in my space, or you cut that person off immediately because clearly they have some issues with managing how they treat other people. And now, I have been a proponent of both styles, depending on the person that it is. Especially familial people, they tend to get the latter style is like, the first style where it's like, hey, this is traumatic for me, or this feels bad for me, this is the boundary I have around that, and try to work through it with them because, I love them, they're my family. Whereas with strangers or people I just meet, it's just like, I'm not going to have this conversation. You know that this is not in alignment with treating someone well. Just end this right now. And that can be hard to do when you've had traumatic instances. Again, because like I said, you want to keep people around because you want to grow relationships and you want to grow healthy relationships. How do you know if a relationship is healthy? Just like you know if a behavior that you're experiencing with a person is healthy. It makes you feel good, makes you feel a part of something, makes you feel connected to yourself, makes you want to branch out and grow deeper and wider. It doesn't stunt you. It doesn't make you clam up and close up and want to disconnect. It doesn't make you want to hide. That's how you know something is working, that the connection is one that is favorable, right? And that's the same way for the boundaries that you put in place. If you find yourself in an instance where you have to place a boundary and you're feeling icky about the boundary because you don't want the person to dislike you, or outside feedback, right? So that's the first thing I noticed. Once I place this boundary down in place, once I put this boundary in place, am I worried about outside feedback? And that tells me that I still have some work to do around that healing, that trauma, that space in me. Because I know for a fact that this behavior makes me feel unwell. So why do I feel bad about having to place a boundary for someone who is participating in a behavior that makes me feel unwell? You can still place that boundary and do the work on yourself. You don't have to engage that person in your personal work. I think a lot of times we think we have to engage people in our personal work around healing in order to rationalize our behavior, but you don't. One good teaching space for me so far has been the internet, honestly. As you know, I practice yoga, and I practice yoga in my body, and a lot of the times I practice yoga in my body in what people would view as scantily clad or not a lot of clothing. I have my reasons for practicing yoga the way that I practice yoga and wearing what I want to wear. There are other perceptions that people have and they come to the table with, which could be valid for them, but they are not valid for me. When I find myself having to explain to people why I wear what I wear, I know I am having an issue with my boundaries. I am having an issue with standing in my authenticity. So I refrain. I pull myself back, like when I feel like I gotta go, I'm like, oh, no. We're not going to explain to people why I'm comfortable in my body like this. That is their issue. It is not mine. I do not get to take that on. The boundary then for me is, do I let this person stay on my page or do I not? For the most part, I just block people. I do leave up disparaging comments because I listened to one yogi who said that she takes down the comments because they're disgusting and she doesn't like them. I leave up the disparaging comments because I think it's a case study on humanity, honestly. I don't take in the comments, but I think that it's good that we see how people interact with each other. I think it's good that we see how we are reflections in the world and how we show up. I think that there's a lot of censoring, and I'm already blocking you. so you won't get to make another disparaging comment. But I do want people to see what type of person you are, what you show up to the table with. And that's how I enforce my boundary. You're right, they do got always something negative to say, having everything under God. Yeah, people are very interesting. But in these spaces, I find it very interesting how you have to reinforce your boundaries all the time. The internet is a space where I constantly have to reinforce my boundaries because most of the people on the internet I do not know. I will probably never know. So I have to constantly reinforce my boundaries. And it makes me beef up on my boundaries in my personal relationships, honestly. Because then it makes me look at, okay, this person is acting this way on this app. Where do people in my life act this way in real life? Where do I allow people to say disparaging things to me or to show up in my space and be negative and nasty? Because I technically don't do that to myself or with myself. I do my best not to show up with those attitudes and beliefs in regards to myself. That was the first level of healing work that I had to do in order to even test out my boundaries on other people. Because it's not just about your boundaries, having healthy boundaries with others. It's about having healthy boundaries with yourself. How do you speak to yourself? Do you listen to yourself? Are you aware of what you actually feel, what you think, what you know to be true for yourself? It's a lot of inquisition, self-questioning, self-awareness that has to happen in order for you to enforce boundaries outside of yourself. And that's really the reason why we accept behaviors from people that we do not want, is because we're doing it to ourselves most of the time. Most of the time we're disparaging ourselves, we're harmful to ourselves, and so we allow other people to be harmful to us. And that is not a behavior that I engage in with myself. I damn sure not going to do it for anybody else. Somebody said something. Not giving them out on people's platform to acknowledge the best one, even when you see it. Yes, I agree. I think that is definitely something we get to do. Somehow, though, what I think is aspects of the shadow always going to show up. And as a light worker, like we like to say, I'm a light worker, you can't run from the shadow. You have to engage the shadow at all costs. The shadow is the part that is going to transform into the light. I think that's my biggest thing, is that for me, and I can't advise anyone else to do that, because I lived in a lot of darkness as a young person, that it is my job for me to transform any negative energy into positive energy and not to run from it, to allow it to coexist, and to also take it on in a way that is a teaching space, right? I'm always open to learning from the interactions that I have with the world, because I know that it will provide a larger compass for me to see and to connect, right? I cannot teach what I do not know. I cannot engage in what I do not understand. Yes, no, I thank you for that. Yes, and it is really about, yes, not losing yourself. And you're right, at some point in my life, before, I could not do that without turning nasty and getting cantankerous back and losing my life. At this point in my life, I'm able to manage my energy in a way that allows me to transform that energy and not take it on in such a way. Yes. Thank you, Holistic Healing Works. I really appreciate your feedback. So I just wanted to hop on and talk about establishing healthy boundaries, because I know that we have such a hard time doing it. I see it all the time. And, one way that we can start helping people learn healthy boundaries is in childhood. One thing that I do, especially with my son, I do it with my daughters as well, but my son needs a really, what do you call that? I don't want to say he's clingy. He needs a lot of affection, and he likes to get hugs and hang on to people and things of that sort. And because he's my only son, I would, always, embrace him whenever he would ask for it. But then he started needing that same energy from his sisters and other little girls when he started going to school. And so I had to explain to him that he had to ask permission to touch people. That he had to, yes, he's very sensory oriented. Yes, he had to ask permission to touch people. And I had to tell him he had to ask permission to touch me. You have to ask permission out for a hug. You have to ask permission to lay down next to me. You have to ask permission for those things, because these are the things that the boundaries we have to teach our young people so that they won't enforce their needs on other people without asking. And that's a big thing that I don't think that I learned, you know what I mean? As a kid, like when I needed something, instead of asking for it, kind of like just manipulated your way into getting like, Mom, if you could do this, because you know in the back of your head as a kid, you already thinking she's going to say no. So now I have to hem and haw around it and try to make her move to this space, right? So, and that's a part of the energy, right? So you know that you have a parent who is not receptive to your needs. And I think that's the biggest part of where the manipulation energy comes in, is like, being receptive to the needs of your children and the people around you, right? Not saying that you have to always engage them in their needs, but be receptive. And I didn't grow up in a home where people were receptive to my needs. And for a lot of my friends, I don't think that was the case. When I talked to them about how they engage other people. So learning how to be receptive to the needs of people around you, and to establish those, boundaries that are needed. And the main reason it was really important for me to help my son establish those boundaries, because I don't want him to misconstrue any young woman's or young man's, whoever, space. If they don't want him in their space, they will be able to tell him no, because he will ask first. He will propose a question. In my dating experience, and I didn't date a lot of men in my young life because I just didn't trust men in that way, after having the traumatic experience of being abducted. I can count on my one hand the amount of time that I engaged with men as a young woman that asked me for permission to touch you. That actually asked, that said, hey, do you mind if I give you a hug? Or do you mind if I da-da-da-da-da? And I know that as a society, we might find that very, annoying or abnormal, but it honestly should be on par with the norm. Because when we're teaching people that certain body languages and things mean that this person is open to XYZ, this is what leads to rape culture. This is what leads to all of the things that we don't want for our daughters and young men happening. And it's how these abuse type situations get started, is because we don't teach boundaries from a very young age, and we don't teach body awareness and self-awareness from a very young age. And I'm very, that's my biggest drop off to this whole conversation, is teaching body awareness, self-awareness, and permission, asking for permission at a very young age. And then reorienting yourself with those things if you're older. Do I ask people for permission before I touch them? Am I aware of my body? Am I aware of when someone's touching me, how it feels, and if I like it? I literally have been doing a introspective process, going through everything that I have engaged in and currently engaged in, whether or not I actually like it, or whether it was just taught to me that I'm supposed to like it because I'm a woman. And then basically reinforcing my new boundaries based on what I learned. I know that this is a lot of work, and I don't expect everyone to do these types of things, but it's very important to me, as far far as healing is concerned, especially if you've had a lot of trauma. If you had a lot of trauma, you really need to investigate whether or not any of the things you do are things you like. Are they healthy for you? Do they make you feel good? Peace. Do you enjoy them? Do you really enjoy them? Or have you been taught to enjoy certain things? Or do you think you're supposed to enjoy certain things because you're a woman or because you're a man? Or whatever you identify as. Boundaries are very important. They teach us how to be safe in the world. They teach us how to teach other people to keep us safe. And having healthy boundaries, not always, because sometimes people don't respect your boundaries, but having healthy boundaries for me has kept a lot of additional trauma and negative experiences away from my space. So I hope this helps. Y'all have questions or anything to share, then I'm pretty much done for today. That was quick. You know, most conversations don't take that long. I'm gonna check and see what y'all got to say. Yeah, that's it then, guys. I appreciate you guys so much. I hope y'all have a good Friday, and I'm going to be mailing y'all orders. Again, thank you. If you haven't hopped over to my YouTube, it's Zoha's Light. Same, so you can catch me over there. I do a little bit more talking over there because for some reason, not that I care about Instagram's algorithm, but it does something to my conversations, and they barely get seen. I am very over Instagram, and I don't even have time to complain about it. But I appreciate you guys, and if you want crystal adornments, you know where to find me, www.zohameanslight.com, and I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend. I sound real raspy. All right, guys, holla at y'all.